Picture this. You've got two gas leaks on the exact same offshore deck. I mean, they're the exact same size, blowing at the exact same pressure. But 5 seconds later, the gas from those two leaks ends up in completely different places. Welcome to today's explainer, where we're going to unravel this exact mystery. Because that difference in where the gas travels, it completely dictates exactly where you are legally and safely allowed to put a switch, a light fitting, or a junction box. Today, we're breaking down the critical rules of vapor density and gas grouping.
So think about a methane leak for a second. It's a light gas, right? It just drifts upward and easily disperses into the open air. But then imagine a propane leak. Propane is heavier. It actually sinks straight into a deck trench and just pools there. Same leak, totally different destination. And why does this matter? Well, if you're an engineer designing a facility or an operator walking the deck, knowing where the hazard lives is step one. You can't just slap an explosion-proof light fixture anywhere. You really have to know the exact nature of the invisible enemy you're dealing with.
Section 1. Up or down. The physics of vapor density. All right, so in the practical engineering world, following standards set by the IEC and API, if a gas has a relative density below 0.8, we officially call it lighter than air. Methane, or your standard natural gas, is the classic example here. When methane leaks, it naturally wants to rise. It goes up and out into the atmosphere. On an offshore module or inside an industrial plant, that means your highest accumulation risk actually isn't down at your feet, it's way up near the ceilings. It gets trapped under roof structures, inside vent masts, or in any high-level structural pocket, where that rising gas just gets boxed in instead of escaping to the open sky. Now, let's flip that and talk about heavier than air vapors. The rule of thumb here is a relative density above 1.2. Think of things like crude oil vapor, liquefied petroleum gases, or, propane. These vapors sink. They literally drop down to deck level and collect in pits, sumps, trenches, drainage channels, the whole shebang. Actually, the best way to visualize heavier vapors is to think of them exactly like water. They'll travel horizontally right along the deck, following the exact same downhill path that a spilled bucket of water would take. This is incredibly dangerous, because it means the gas can travel pretty far from the actual leak source and just secretly pool in these low-lying confined areas. When you look at standard API guidelines, it perfectly illustrates what happens below grade. Because the vapor is heavier than air, it sinks and pools in those depressions, like a sump or a trench. That entire below-grade location essentially becomes a highly classified hazardous area, often a Zone 1, simply because the gas is just going to sit there. And this is exactly why cable trenches and drain systems get their own specific hazardous area envelopes. You literally have to design your electrical systems, assuming those trenches are, invisible bathtubs for explosive vapors. And expanding on that idea, the hazard radius actually grows outward and downward from a source that's located above grade. Even if you have totally adequate ventilation, a heavier than air gas release creates a very defined envelope that loops down to the solid platform or the ground below. The standards dictate really specific distances for this based on the pressure and volume of the potential leak. So the big takeaway here is that vapor density tells you the geometry of your danger zone. It tells you exactly where the gas will go. But that's really only half the battle. Section 2. How easy does it ignite? The chemistry of gas groups. So gases are also officially grouped by how easily they catch fire. In the IEC system for surface industries, we use Group 2, which is broken down into IIA, IIB, and IIC. Group IIA, which is represented by propane, actually requires the most ignition energy to catch fire, so it's technically your lowest risk group among the flammables. Then you have Group IIB, like ethylene, sitting right there in the middle. But then there's Group IIC. This includes hydrogen and acetyl. These gases ignite with almost no energy at all. They are your absolute highest risk group. And because they ignite so easily, Group IIC drives the absolute toughest, most stringent electrical equipment manufacturing requirements in the world. Let's use a real-world analogy to kind of make this stick, because it's a super vital concept. Think of a Group 2A gas like a safety match. It only lights if you strike it hard against its own specific box, right? It takes deliberate energy. It's actually relatively hard to set off by accident. But a Group IC gas, like hydrogen, that's exactly like the static electricity you get off a metal doorknob in the dead of winter. The tiniest, completely invisible, instantaneous spark is literally enough to trigger a massive explosion. That is exactly why hydrogen service, say in an offshore unit's battery room, demands Group IC-rated everything, no exceptions. There are absolutely no shortcuts allowed when you're dealing with a gas that is that sensitive to static sparks. Section 3. matching equipment to risk, putting the rules into practice. Okay, time for a quick knowledge check. Imagine you're holding a junction box in your hands, and the nameplate clearly says it's rated for Group IB only. Now, your supervisor tells you to go install it in a new battery room where hydrogen, which remember is a Group IC gas, might be present. Can you legally and safely install that piece of equipment in that room? Take a second to think about that hierarchy we just talked about. The answer is a hard no. You absolutely cannot install it. Equipment that's rated for a lower group, like IIB, is not automatically safe for a higher, more easily ignited group like IIC. In hazardous area design, the golden rule is that you must always match or exceed the actual gas group present. You could totally use a IIC-rated box in an IIB area, because that's exceeding the requirement, which is perfectly safe, but you can never, ever go backwards. Never assume a lower rating will do the job when you're dealing with highly sensitive gases. So let's tie this all together. You now know the two foundational factors that dictate every single piece of electrical installation in a hazardous area. First is vapor density. This tells you if your gas rises or sinks, which points you exactly to where you need to look for accumulation, whether you're checking the ceiling pockets up high or the floor trenches down below. Second is the gas group. This tells you how easily that gas ignites, from the relatively stubborn IIA to the incredibly volatile IIC. Both of these factors feed directly into the strict safety codes that, frankly, keep facilities from exploding. But here's the crazy part. Even if you get the placement right, and even if you perfectly match your equipment to the gas group, you're still not totally safe. Because every single piece of equipment out there has a surface temperature. And if that surface gets hotter than the gas around it can tolerate, well, you don't even need a spark to cause a disaster. The heat alone will ignite the atmosphere. So, exactly how hot is too hot? That brings us to temperature classes T1 through T6. But we're going to have to solve that mystery in our next explainer.